Rasoke Chahan in absentia. The Group Vice Chancellor Jan K.J. Singh, Jan B.K. Aluwalia, Professor S.T. Sharma, my distinguished colleagues sitting in the dais, off the dais, very dear students, ladies and gentlemen. I am here today to give you a perspective on positive psychology, which is themed under positivism. Well, I would like to first express my gratitude and thanks to the organizers for choosing me as the chief guest for this function, and also to give me the opportunity to talk something that I have prepared for my dear students here. Well, I have a very specific purpose for talking here. I would not like to use more jargons. I would like to have three purposes in mind. One is that we have been talking of positive psychology for quite some time with too many good words. How good are they? What kind of research we conduct on positive psychology? If I am correct, then we are only talking about some kind of social contextual variables that we have been trying to address from time and again. But how far we have been successful to experimentally prove the science behind it, that is the subject of my deliberation today. We talk about science of happiness, but if you try to understand happiness with a bit of science, the happiness will go away. It's very difficult to understand where happiness is. By profession, I am a clinical neuropsychologist. Most of my researches are in the area of brain damages. And to my utter surprises, we did not find any center of happiness in the brain, which is so-called the emotion of happiness. We have centers for sadness, fear, anger, surprise, disgust. The Western literature suggests that happiness is nothing but a manner of communication. So you communicate with happiness. That's why it is centered in the left side of the brain, which is basically the Broca's area. So I would not like to give you an antithesis of positive psychology, but I would certainly like you to tell that if we are all the time positive, will we survive in this world? If we ask the students here that out of which the value, expectation and reality, which one do you like most? The generation now will say that reality is most important, and if we go by reality, then you cannot survive with positivity only. The reason I'll tell you later on. But before we do that, let me also tell you that by having 3 conferences consecutive, we have to take stock of the situation that we have been doing it, but what is the deliverable to the society? We'll go back with a positive frame of mind. Is it only to address the people who are sitting here, or we are also interested in delivering something to the society? What is that deliverable? That's one thing I'll be discussing. And then I would also like to discuss that in the arena of positive psychology, in order to make people positive, what is foremost and most important thing is to get rid of the misconceptions that we have in our life. Let me tell you, if the misconceptions in our life is taken away, we would automatically be positive to a great extent, because the positivity we are talking about is not of mind, is of mindset. So there is a great deal of difference between mind and mindset. We'll talk about that as well. And finally, I have a basket of questions for people who would be interested in carrying out some kind of research in the area of positive psychology or positivism. These questions are framed in layman terms. so that any scientific angle other than behavioral sciences should also be able to take it up. But I would like to give a perspective of biological sciences as well to let you know that positive psychology is not only in the mind, it's also in the brain. Of course, mind includes brain or brain includes mind. That's a different kind of discussion we would not like to go through. So at the outset, I would like to give you some of the misconceptions that we have in our life. Whether getting rid of these misconceptions would help us becoming positive or not, let us see it. I'd like to quickly go through. Let me also tell you, I'll not take more than 15 to 20 minutes to let you all about what I've got to say, because this is only a basket of questions, and these questions we need to address from time to time for every research question that we would like to take care of. Well, when we talk about mental health, the misconceptions that we have, because positive psychology emerged as a fact that most of the researches are being conducted on negative mental health only. Positive mental health or mental health per se does not refer about negative state only. Mental health also talks about positive state as well. We have a misconception that only a few people suffer from negative mental health. If you talk about negative mental health, a large number of people will come into forum. Persons with positive mental health do not suffer from anxiety or stress. This is a utter misconception that those who have got a positive frame of mind, they have got no anxiety, they have got no stress. We also believe that physically fit persons suffer from less from mental health problem. Somebody who is physically fit will not have any mental health problem. Also a misconception. We also believe that if your mood has improved, then you are out of depression. It's a danger, in fact, in the treatment of depression. Most depressive people before committing suicide actually become very jovial as well. So it's a misconception that improved mood roots out depression. We also believe that people with positive state of mind have less sense of deprivation. It's a misconception. We also believe that intelligent people are more positive. A misconception. Intelligent people have got a lot of negativities as well. People with positive mental health is less stressed, and presence of positive traits automatically ensures absence of negative traits. Actually, they coexist. There are a lot of misconceptions we have in the area of mental health, and positive psychology, when we try to understand, we have a tendency to go away from negative state so that we can concentrate fully on positivities. This is a wrong notion. In fact, they are opposite in tendencies but complementary as well. I'll also tell you how by becoming positivity we bring danger to our survival. Well, before we talk about those paradoxical things, I would like to talk about certain issues which are related to resilience, belief, and the optimism as a concept. At the outset, I would like to talk about resilience. We all know what resilience means. It's actually attainment of competence despite adversity. But the question that we have in hand, why some people bounce back while others collapse after failure? This is a question. It's a researchable question. In fact, I'm interested in getting more and more questions for the science of happiness, or the science of positivity, or the science of positivism, or the science of experience, or the science of happiness. This is a very intriguing question. So we have Olympics going on, and you will find that some people who could not make it will retire, and some people who could not make it will actually try to make it for the next Olympic with much more vigor as well as rigor. Why does this happen? This is a researchable question, that some people bounce back while others collapse after failure. Is the basis biological, psychological, or social contextual? More often we, the psychologists sitting here, believe that it is purely social contextual as well as at best it can be psychological. But is there a biological basis as well? I'll try to answer one or two such questions because I do not have the answer for all the questions in hand, but I'll try to answer some such questions. Is it possible to find out the pathways that eventuate to resilience? Because if it is biological, psychological, social contextual at a multiple level, can we actually get the pathway for the resilience as a behavior? Or can we train people to become resilient or mentally tough? That is, can we deliver something to the society? This is a very important issue because whenever we try to understand a given science, particularly a science like positive psychology or positivism, we need to have a thought clarity, we need to have interdisciplinarity, we need to have interinstitutional compatibility, we need to have deliverability, and we need to have a seamless continuity in our research program. I repeat, without having thought clarity, probably these questions cannot be answered. Without having something as deliverable to the society, I don't think we would be able to continue with this kind of research. And without having interdisciplinarity, like biological sciences, social sciences, as well as behavioral sciences put together, we would not be able to answer anything related to that. And finally, interinstitutional compatibility to have seamless continuity. It's very important that people come together, join hands through institutions, get the source, the pathways, why some people become resilient while others fail. It would really be a good thing for the society, and if we can find such pathways, we would definitely be able to train people in this direction. Well, science has very recently published, Nature. Nature a year back has very recently found a particular area in the brain is called rostral anterior cingulate cortex. It's the area for optimism. This paper, if any one of you are interested in reading Nature, you will find that this is one area which gets activated when a person becomes optimistic. Now, some people don't become optimistic. Those who do not become optimistic, we have found the area called RACC, that is rostral anterior cingulate cortex, do not activate. Now, whether some people are already predestined toward not having such activation is a questionable issue. But as of now, the evidence suggests that there is a brain center for people who become resilient, and there is a brain center where the people's resilience can actually be identified through a mechanism called functional MRI. I'll also talk about belief, the faith. I'll also talk about an article which has just published in Science, the biology of belief. Is belief simply in the mind, or belief also have got a biological state? That many of us, almost all of us, believe that there is God, and there is punitive God, there is rewarding God. A lot of researches are now being conducted on God, that I believe God or I do not believe God. If I believe God, then there is a punitive God or a non-punitive or a rewarding God. What happens in the brain? Is it purely psychological or it has got a biological concomitant as well? Look, I am not trying to give you a biological point of view. What I am trying to tell you that this is what is happening in positive psychology other than in behavioral sciences, where the radiophysicists have been trying to understand the issues related to positivism, and these evidences will certainly help us understand whether we should also simultaneously try to answer this through certain social experimental program as well or not. For example, how far faith and health is related. Now, Nature has published this, Science has published this report that those who are having faith in God, they live longer. It's a questionable issue. I know that by telling this, I'll be raising more questions than giving answers. But that's what is the evidence the Western world has given. And we know that the theories in Western world are based on, most of the theories are based on with very little population in the Western world. In fact, Harry Trandis once said that 70% of the theories are based on only 30% of the population in the world. The vice versa is that only 30% of the theories are based on 70% of the population in the world. Given that we do not know, I mean, if you ask a person whether you believe in God or not, almost everybody in India will say that, well, we believe in God. But probably we will not get the other side of the sample who do not believe in God. But in Western world, there are some such samples, and there are a lot of researches have been done. On AIDS patients also, cancer patients also, that the question comes, does spirituality predict better disease control? This suggestion comes throughout the research is that, well, AIDS patients responded much better, cancer patients responded much better when they become spiritual, and the disease control is much better if they are spiritual. And that's once again a report published in Science. Is there a biological mechanism that regulates belief? I'll show you a picture immediately after this slide. Do we have a specific brain region that gets activated during prayer and meditation? The latest scientific researches, I'll show you a slide as well here, which is conducted in one of the DRDO labs called Institute of Nuclear Medicine and Allied Sciences. And is it possible to bring permanent change in brain through meditation? That's also a question I'll answer through these slides. Now, belief, the brain centers have been identified. Nature has once again published these documents. I have tried to accumulate all these evidence to give a scientific flavor, an experimental flavor to all these researches which we have been conducting with a flurry of good words. Simply having certain good words will not help us actually do research in the area of positive psychology. We have to experimentally prove, objectively verify various such issues in the area of positive psychology. So the idea is that I let you know how the brain centers function when you believe and when you do not believe. It has been found that there are greater signals for belief compared to disbelief appeared in the ventromedial portion of the prefrontal cortex, lateral occipital cortex, and superior frontal gyrus. Now, many of you may not be knowing how these functional MRI researches are done. The science is very simple. When you believe something that the God is there, or I am getting a connect with the God, a neuron fires, and whenever there is a fire in the neuron, the oxygen is depleted. The moment oxygen is depleted, the nearby capillaries open in the brain, and the blood comes rushing in to compensate for the deoxygenated portion in the brain. Whenever there is deoxygenated and oxygenated concentration in the brain, that gets imaged through a magnetic resonance imaging, which is called functional magnetic resonance imaging. These experimental conditions are very tough. They are not just as simple as I have been presenting to you. They are all event related data, and these data suggest that a person believes about God has a definite activation in the frontal lobe as well as in the occipital lobe. In one of our DRDO lab, this research was done. A functional MRI was done for those people who are meditating for 2 to 5 years. In fact, this research was conducted by one of our scientists called Dr. Chin Khushu, who has conducted a series of research on people who have been meditating for the last 20 years. So it has been found that if a person has been meditating for 2 to 5 years, there has been an activation in the frontal lobe. Now the activation suggests that if you are meditating over a period of time, your frontal lobe gets activation in such a manner that it does not allow you to think in a random fashion. That any input that you draw for a particular reason come in formation, which actually results in the form of information. So we have found that when a person has been doing prayer very hard over a period of time, about 10 years in terms of meditation, the activation comes from frontal lobe to the parietal lobe. But if the person has been meditating for over 17 years, it has been found that the activation is there in the frontal lobe, that is in the prefrontal lobe, as well as in the occipital lobe. And even with the eyes closed, the person gets an activation in the occipital lobe, suggesting that the person has been seeing something even if the eyes are closed during the meditating state. What the person has been seeing, the person himself or herself cannot actually speak about. But we have found activation which we are not supposed to, because the person is not seeing anybody. If the person is not seeing anybody, there should not be any activation at the back of the head, because this is the center for vision. And if your eyes are closed, you should not get any activation. Under normal condition, we don't get any activation. But if the person has been meditating over a period of time with the eyes closed, and during meditation, in the magnet that is in functional MRI, the person has been found to having the activation in the occipital zone. These are very interesting findings. These have been published in a series of articles. And if you ask today's environment, people will say that people are naturally negative. Is it so? If it is so, probably we would not have survived. Now, many people say that there is no center of happiness in the brain, but the brain is actually tuned towards only two emotions, fight or flight. Either we fight, that is anger as an emotion, or we flee, that is fear as an emotion. The brain is only tuned towards these two kinds of emotion. But we don't know as of now whether the human being is naturally positive or not. This is a researchable question. Is optimism also a biologically defined state? That is there any activity in the brain that is found? It has been found that those who are highly optimistic, they have got a higher concentration of dopamine, catecholamine, serotonin, and epinephrine secretions. And they have got activation, selective activation pattern in the septal area of the brain and certain areas of the hippocampus and the limbic system. Now, I am talking from a perspective of a biologist, but actually my major intention is to let you know that positivism or positive psychology is not confined within the realm of the social contextual variables. It has got its higher sentence, and there are questions which need to be addressed systematically if we are really interested in conducting social experimental studies in this area. Can we produce biochemical change in our body by becoming optimistic? This has been experimentally proved that by becoming optimistic, people can actually change their cortisol level and non-epinephrine level. Now, if we can do that, can we really train a person to bring the biochemical changes in the body? Another questionable issue. Do optimists live longer than pessimists? Once again, nature has published that yes, optimists live longer as compared to pessimists. Now these are questionable, with dubious authenticity, but these are researched areas with epidemiological studies suggesting that optimists live longer as compared to pessimists. Why some people get benefit from placebo while others develop nocebo effect? You all know placebo effect. Placebo effect, we are all aware of, that a person who is having high level of optimism are very highly susceptible to getting the benefit of a particular drug, which is essentially an inert drug or a non-effective drug, and they get benefit out of it. But some people, even after getting the real drug, they get the wrong effect of the drug. Suppose you have got headache and you got a aspirin, and he gets a acidity, or she gets an acidity of it. That's nocebo effect, which is in addition to the biochemical changes that happens in the stomach, it is multiplied by a pessimistic state which is called a nocebo effect. We the psychologists can actually, we have been talking about placebo effect. Can't we frame an experiment with placebo and nocebo effect doing simultaneously? Some quasi-experimental, some social experimental research will definitely come up, and that will give us a better result. If the result is not replicable in science, then it cannot be science. We'll talk only about philosophy. We'll only remain in the juggleries of words. That is, what is the difference between optimism, hope, resilience, happiness? Is it all same, or are they all biologically different? In order to do science, we have to have at least 5 angles for a given construct. There must be a theoretical basis, there must be a biological basis, there must be a developmental basis, there must be a cultural basis, and there must be a statistical basis. Without having 5 different bases, we can't establish a construct. So if hope is a very important issue, what Professor Sharma has just mentioned, if resilience is a very important issue, in fact, Dr. Seligman has published an article on optimism in military, in Army for the business people in Harvard Business Review a year back is something which is very intriguing, and he has done a big science with it. Now, are we really doing the science through the organized conferences, workshops that we have been doing? My idea is to promote more such questions, more such objective questions, because in any research, framing question is most important. And we have been only trying to answer positive psychology as an issue from theoretical perspectives. How much developmental neuroscience we have done, how much biological intervening we have seen, how much socio-cultural concomitant variables going on we have seen, and how much statistical data we have to ensure that, well, this positivism is important and this really works. So the idea is that if we do research with these questions in mind, definitely we will get a better perspective for tomorrow. We'll have a better answer for this. Let me also tell you with what I have really started, that whether optimism will really benefit or not, us or not. Let me tell you, optimism brings more danger rather than benefit. See this. Do we expect to live longer and be healthier than average? What is optimism bias? Let us understand optimism bias. Once again, current science published this report, optimism bias. An expectancy that good in comparison to bad will occur without evidence to support. Let me tell you, we always overestimate ourselves by becoming optimistic. Now, how far we must be optimistic? You know, 2008 Great Recession has been actually, it actually was brought by some of the economists who actually predicted that there would be better economy in 2009, 2010. It's actually optimism bias. We all expect that we'll live longer and be healthier than the average people in the country. What is the basis behind it? If we try to be too optimistic, are we really benefit us? So the optimism as a construct, if we try to make use of it without having the science behind it, will actually fall into the bracket of people who are actually invoking negativity for themselves. Do we make more mistakes by becoming unrealistically optimistic? Yes, most of the people suffer because by becoming optimistically unrealistic, they bring more danger for themselves. Do we have a selective estimation error about future? Why not we conduct certain studies where people would be asked to estimate the future? Do we overestimate? Do we underestimate? We all do Muller-Lyer experiments. Those who are psychology students, they all do it. We know what is overestimation, what is underestimation. The similar illusions occur in our mind as well. And there is a brain center for overestimation. How to control that? Are we really promoting optimism without controlling for bias? So optimism bias is another area which we have never been seen properly, and probably this is one area. In order to promote positive psychology, we have to actually work in the area of optimism bias as well. These are the dangers of doing positive psychology without having restraint. So there are many difficulties in such kind of experimental research. Let me tell you, selection of appropriate baseline in positive psychology is very difficult. In negative sciences, negative mental health, a negative state, you can actually draw a very good baseline. But in positive psychology, the baseline, in positivism, the baseline is very difficult. What is positivism for you as a baseline is different from me. Event related data is very difficult. Monitoring emotions are very difficult. Emotions, like positive emotions, do not just come in and go. They cannot switch off and switch in. So the point is that it's very difficult to synchronize multiple level of data and to avoid the reductionism pitfall. The reductionism pitfall is nothing but if you address too much of biology in positive science, then there is a difficulty, because biologists will go to the level of molecules. Whether molecules will ever be able to understand the whole behavior or not. Now there is a problem between the macro level and the micro level approaches in positive psychology. The macro level tries to see everything holistically. Now if you see everything holistically, you will not be able to get a cause and effect relationship. And at the micro level, if you see at the biological level, everything at the molecular and the cellular level, you would never be able to integrate the whole behavior with the part behavior. So the reductionists like biologists say that social scientists like psychologists have got nothing to say apart from telling the history of mental experience. Well, the molar scientists, the behavioral scientists always say the reductionists have got nothing to explain but to have certain relationship within certain cellular activities. So these approaches are having difficulties. We have to see how best we can do that. Finally, I have got one more slide to just let you know that is very important to operationalize the constructs like hope, happiness, optimism, resilience. There are so many words in the realm of positive psychology. Until and unless we properly operationalize them, define them separately, we would not be able to actually undertake any kind of research. Also, it's very important that we identify the control variables in experimental studies. It's very easy to do experimental studies with other kinds of variables, but with hope, optimism, resilience kind of researches, what are the control variables in social experimental conditions are very difficult to identify. Relevance of negative states in positive psychology research has never been emphasized. Actually, they are two opposite states but in complementary manner. What is the relevance of having negativity in the positive psychology research? That also need to be understood. The importance of the adaptive and survival value of positive state is also need to be understood, that by becoming positive, how do we survive? Whether positivity has got a survival effect or not, or adaptive value or not, that also needs to be understood. And finally, there should be a balanced orientation in macro and micro level analysis of behavior. Those who would be choosing to conduct research in the area of positive psychology are advised to look into these areas. I have not drawn all these input from any source other than the photographs that I have shown, which are published in Nature and Sciences. These inputs are for those students who would be interested in conducting research in positive psychology. No doubt, 99% of the researches are done on negative issues only. Only 1% of the research is done on positive psychology. But that 1% is it has to be substantial. One has to follow a proper experimental procedure, experimental steps, then only it would be possible. Thank you so much for paying attention to us.